At 11:33 hours on May 9, 1941, Sub-Lieutenant David Balm stood on the deck of HMS Bulldog, watching a German submarine surface 800 meters away. He was 20 years old. He had been in the Royal Navy for 3 years. He had never boarded an enemy vessel. In the next 40 minutes, he would recover equipment that would change the course of World War II. The submarine was U-110. The boat had been forced to surface after depth charge damage from HMS Bulldog and HMS Broadway. Water poured from the conning tower vents. German sailors were jumping into the North Atlantic. The submarine was listing to port, settling lower in the water. It appeared to be sinking. Commander Joe Baker Creswell commanded HMS Bulldog. He was watching through binoculars from the bridge. He could see the German crew abandoning ship. None of them were manning the deck gun. No one was attempting to fight. The submarine appeared abandoned. But it wasn't sinking quickly. The hull was still mostly above water. The conning tower stood clear. Baker Creswell made an immediate decision: board the submarine, capture whatever intelligence materials were inside before it sank. Enigma machines, codebooks, charts, anything. The intelligence value could be enormous. He called for volunteers. Balm stepped forward immediately. 8 sailors joined him. They climbed into a small boat and rowed toward U-110. The submarine was rolling in the swells. Water washed across the deck. Balm didn't know if the boat was booby-trapped. German submarines carried scuttling charges that could sink the boat in minutes. If those charges detonated while the boarding party was inside, everyone would die. The small boat reached U-110's hull. Balm climbed onto the submarine's outer casing. The steel was slippery. He made his way to the conning tower. The hatch stood open. He looked down into darkness. Emergency lighting provided dim illumination. He couldn't see anyone inside. He couldn't hear anything except water sloshing below. Balm descended the ladder. The interior was a mess. Equipment had been thrown from mounts by the depth charge explosions. Papers were scattered everywhere. Water leaked from damaged pipes. The smell of chlorine indicated battery damage. But the submarine was empty. The German crew had abandoned the boat completely. Balm called up to his men. "It's clear. Get down here and start searching. We need documents, codebooks, anything that looks important." Telegraphist Alan Long climbed down and headed straight for the radio room. That's where the communications equipment would be. That's where the codes would be kept. He found the Enigma machine mounted on a desk, secured in its wooden case. The machine appeared undamaged. More importantly, next to the machine were documents, key settings, codebooks, operating instructions. Everything British cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park needed to read German naval communications. Long carefully removed the Enigma machine from its mount. He passed it up through the conning tower to sailors waiting on deck. The documents were gathered into waterproof bags. Other crew members searched additional compartments. From the captain's cabin, Balm recovered the boat's war diary, operations orders, and navigation charts. From various compartments, they collected technical manuals, recognition signals, and position reporting grids. The boarding party worked for 40 minutes. The submarine was settling lower in the water with each passing minute. Baker Creswell ordered them to return to HMS Bulldog. Before leaving, Balm attempted to arrange a tow line to bring U-110 back to port. A line was attached, but the submarine was flooding too rapidly. At approximately 1300 hours, U-110's bow rose vertically and the submarine sank stern first. The boat went down at position 60 degrees 24 EN 30 Ferdig 49W in approximately 3,000 meters of water. Of U-110's crew of 47 officers and men, 15 had died during the depth charge attack or from shellfire when the boat surfaced. The remaining 32 crew members were rescued by HMS Broadway and HMS Primrose. They were not told that U-110 had been boarded. They assumed the submarine had sunk immediately after they abandoned it. The German survivors were segregated from other prisoners and transported to POW camps in Canada, where they remained isolated. The secret had to be maintained. If Germany learned that Enigma materials had been captured, they would change their codes immediately. Everything depended on the Germans never knowing what had been taken from U-110. Captain Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp, who had commanded U-110, did not survive. He died in the water, though circumstances remain uncertain. Some accounts suggest he swam back toward U-110, possibly attempting to ensure the boat's destruction or prevent capture. He drowned before rescue could reach him. His body was not recovered. German Naval Command received no information that U-110 had been captured. The official German record listed U-110 as missing in action, presumed sunk by depth charges. Germany continued using Enigma machines throughout the war, never learning that British forces could read their encrypted messages. HMS Bulldog arrived at Scapa Flow on May 11, 1941. The captured Enigma machine and documents were transferred under armed guard and driven to Bletchley Park, arriving on May 12. Alan Turing and the cryptanalysts in Hut 8 examined the materials immediately. The key settings showed exactly how German operators configured the machine daily, which rotors to use, starting positions, ring settings, plugboard connections, everything they needed. Using these settings, Bletchley Park could read German naval Enigma messages encrypted with June 1941 keys. More importantly, the captured materials provided insights into German operating procedures, allowing cryptanalysts to develop methods for breaking future keys even without captures. By mid-May 1941, Bletchley Park was reading German naval Enigma traffic with only short delays. Messages were typically decrypted within hours of transmission, but the story of how that machine came to exist and why it mattered so much began years earlier in Poland. In 1932, 3 Polish mathematicians were recruited by the Polish Cipher Bureau to work on German military codes. Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zygalski were in their early 20s. They had degrees in mathematics. They understood cryptography theoretically, but had never worked on real military codes before. The Germans were using a machine called Enigma to encrypt their military communications. The machine had been invented in the 1920s for commercial use. German military forces adopted modified versions in the late 1920s. By 1932, all German military branches used Enigma. The Polish Cipher Bureau had acquired one of the early commercial machines, but the military version was different. The rotors were wired differently. The operating procedures were different. The Poles needed to figure out how the military machine worked. Rejewski approached the problem mathematically. He treated the Enigma machine as a system of permutations that could be analyzed using group theory. He didn't need to know the exact internal wiring if he could determine the mathematical relationships between inputs and outputs. With help from a German traitor who provided some keys and operational documents, Rejewski reconstructed the internal wiring of the military Enigma rotors by December 1932. By 1933, the Polish Cipher Bureau could read German Enigma messages regularly. They developed mechanical devices called bomber machines to automate the decryption process. 6 bomber machines working together could find the correct daily keys in approximately 2 hours. The Poles kept their success secret. They read German military communications throughout the 1930s. They learned about German rearmament, military exercises, and tactical developments. But they told no one outside Poland. The intelligence advantage was too valuable to share. By 1938, the situation was changing. Germany was increasing Enigma's complexity. In September 1938, the Germans increased the number of rotors from 3 to 5. Operators still used only 3 rotors at a time, but they selected which 3 from a set of 5. This increased the possible rotor orders from 6 to 60. The Poles would need 10 times more bomber machines to maintain their decryption capability. Poland couldn't afford to build them. In July 1939, Major Guido Langer, head of the Polish Cipher Bureau, made a decision. War was coming. Poland would be invaded. The Enigma secret would be lost unless it was shared with allies who could continue the work. Langer arranged a meeting with French and British intelligence near Warsaw. At this meeting, the Poles shared everything. They provided replica Enigma machines. They explained Rejewski's mathematical methods. They gave the British and French complete rotor wiring diagrams and bomber designs. The British representatives were stunned. They had been working on Enigma for years with minimal success. The Poles had solved it in 1932 and had been reading German messages for 7 years. The information transfer gave Britain a starting point that might otherwise have taken years to develop. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, the Polish Cipher Bureau evacuated. Rejewski and his colleagues escaped to France and continued their cryptanalysis work there until France fell in 1940. Some of the Polish mathematicians eventually reached Britain and continued working on German codes. Britain established its cryptanalysis centre at Bletchley Park, a Victorian mansion in Buckinghamshire, approximately 80 kilometres northwest of London. The government code and cipher school relocated there in August 1939, just before war began. Commander Alistair Denniston headed the organisation. He recruited mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, and crossword puzzle experts. By 1940, Bletchley Park employed several hundred personnel. Alan Turing joined Bletchley Park in September 1939. He was 27 years old, a mathematician from Cambridge University with groundbreaking work in mathematical logic and computation theory. Turing was assigned to Hut 8, the section responsible for German naval Enigma. Naval Enigma was particularly difficult. The German Navy used stricter operating procedures than other services. They changed keys daily. They used different keys for different areas and operations. Breaking naval Enigma required both mathematical analysis and captured materials. Turing understood that mechanical automation was essential. The Polish bomber design was a starting point, but it needed improvement to handle German procedural changes and increased complexity. Turing designed a new machine called the bomb that tested possible Enigma settings by exploiting cribs. A crib was a piece of known or guessed plaintext. If codebreakers could guess that a message contained a specific word or phrase, the bomb could test millions of possible settings to find which one produced that plaintext from the ciphertext. The first British bomb, named Victory, became operational in March 1940. The machine stood approximately 2 meters high, 2 meters wide, and 0.6 meters deep. It contained 108 rotating drums arranged in sets. The machine weighed approximately 1 ton. When a bomb found a setting that produced sensible German text, it stopped and indicated the settings. Operators then used those settings on an actual Enigma machine to decrypt the message. From September 1939 through April 1940, Bletchley Park achieved some success reading German Enigma traffic. This success depended on cribs and captured materials. But on May 1, 1940, German naval Enigma procedures changed. New security measures were implemented. Bletchley Park lost the ability to read naval Enigma. The blackout lasted through most of 1940 and into 1941. During this blackout period, the Battle of the Atlantic intensified. German U-boats operated in wolf packs, coordinated by radio communications. The submarines attacked convoys crossing the Atlantic from North America to Britain. In the last quarter of 1940, U-boats sank over 400 Allied merchant ships. The rate of sinking exceeded the rate of ship construction. Britain was losing the Battle of the Atlantic. The problem wasn't that British forces couldn't detect U-boats or couldn't sink them when found. The problem was finding them. The Atlantic was vast. A convoy could sail for days without seeing a submarine. But the U-boats knew where the convoys were because German intelligence tracked them. The submarines positioned themselves along the convoy routes and waited. If British intelligence could read German naval communications, they would know U-boat positions. Convoys could be rerouted away from submarine patrol lines. But without the ability to decrypt Enigma messages, British forces were operating blind. Breaking back into naval Enigma became Britain's highest cryptographic priority. The solution required captured materials. Enigma machines alone weren't enough. Bletchley Park needed the daily key settings, the code books that explained abbreviated signals, and the operating procedures that would provide cribs. These materials were held on German vessels, and those vessels had to be captured before they could scuttle their equipment. The first significant capture came on May 7, 1941. HMS Somali and HMS Tartar captured the German weather ship München south of Iceland. Weather ships transmitted meteorological data that U-boats used for navigation and attack planning. The ships used Enigma machines to encrypt their transmissions. When München was boarded, the crew hadn't had time to destroy all their materials. British sailors recovered Enigma keys for June 1941 and various codebooks. 2 days later, on May 9th, U-110 was attacked and boarded. That capture provided additional June keys, confirming the München materials, plus operational documents and the submarine's war diary. The combination of both captures gave Bletchley Park everything they needed. By mid-May 1941, Hut 8 was reading German naval Enigma regularly. The intelligence was designated Ultra and classified at the highest security level. Only a few dozen people in the British government knew Ultra existed. The intelligence was passed to operational commanders without revealing its source. Cover stories were created to explain how targets were located. The impact on the Battle of the Atlantic was immediate. The Admiralty's submarine tracking room used ultra-intelligence to plot U-boat positions. Convoys were rerouted around known patrol lines. In June 1941, Allied shipping losses dropped significantly. In August 1941, U-boats sank only 23 merchant ships, the lowest monthly total since early 1940. Admiral Karl Dönitz, who commanded German U-boat forces, noted in his war diary that convoys were somehow avoiding his patrol lines. He suspected British direction-finding equipment or airborne radar might be detecting U-boat transmissions. He ordered operational changes to reduce transmission times and frequencies. He never suspected that Enigma encryption had been broken. But the Ultra advantage didn't last continuously. In February 1942, German U-boats introduced 4-rotor Enigma machines designated M4. The 4th rotor multiplied the possible settings by 26. Bletchley Park's 3-rotor bombs couldn't break 4-rotor Enigma. Another blackout occurred that lasted until December 1942. During this blackout period, Allied shipping losses increased dramatically. In November 1942, U-boats sank 117 merchant ships. The Battle of the Atlantic was being lost again. The situation was critical. Britain needed American supplies to survive. The planned invasion of North Africa required safe shipping lanes. Without the ability to read U-boat communications, convoys were vulnerable. The solution came from another capture. On October 30, 1942, HMS Petard, HMS Hero, HMS Dulverton, and HMS Herworth attacked U-559 in the Mediterranean. The submarine was forced to surface. Before it sank, Lieutenant Anthony Fasson and able seaman Colin Grazier boarded the sinking submarine and retrieved Enigma materials, including codebooks and key tables. Both men drowned when the submarine sank, but the materials they recovered were passed to sailors who had remained on deck. A third boarding party member, 16-year-old canteen assistant Tommy Brown, also participated in the boarding and survived. The materials from U-559 provided the information needed to attack 4-rotor naval Enigma. By December 1942, Bletchley Park resumed reading German naval communications. The blackout ended. Ultra-intelligence resumed flowing to operational commanders. From January 1943 forward, the Battle of the Atlantic turned decisively in favor of the Allies. The combination of ultra-intelligence, improved radar, more escort ships, escort aircraft carriers, and long-range patrol aircraft created an integrated anti-submarine system that inflicted unsustainable losses on the U-boat force. In May 1943, Dönitz withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic temporarily due to excessive losses. The crisis point had passed. Throughout 1943 and 1944, Bletchley Park maintained the ability to read German naval Enigma with only occasional short blackout periods. The intelligence allowed Allied convoys to be routed safely. It provided warning of U-boat concentrations. It enabled offensive operations against submarines when they were vulnerable during refueling operations. The intelligence contribution was decisive, but maintaining the secret required extraordinary security measures. If Germany learned that Enigma was compromised, they would change to a different encryption system immediately. Everything depended on the Germans never discovering that their codes were broken. Ultra-intelligence was shared only with commanders who had absolute need to know. Most military personnel had no knowledge of Ultra's existence. When ultra-intelligence was used to locate U-boats or intercept German operations, cover stories were created. Aircraft were sent to search areas where ultra-indicated targets would be found, creating the appearance that discovery was by chance or conventional reconnaissance. Sometimes potential intelligence couldn't be acted upon if doing so would reveal that codes were broken. After capturing Enigma materials from U-110, British forces made no immediate changes to convoy routes that would indicate new intelligence. Several weeks passed before information from the captured keys was used operationally, avoiding temporal correlation with the capture. Similar security procedures followed every Enigma-related capture throughout the war. German cryptographic authorities conducted regular security assessments. They examined whether British actions suggested code compromise. They analyzed patterns in convoy routing, attack timing, and interception rates. Their assessments consistently concluded that Enigma remained secure. The mathematical complexity of the machine, they reasoned, made breaking it impossible without captured keys. And captured keys only compromised messages encrypted with those specific keys. Daily key changes meant that even if keys were captured, the compromise was temporary. What German assessments missed was that captured materials provided more than just keys. They provided operational procedures, message formats, and frequent cribs that allowed codebreakers to attack future keys, even without captures. The combination of Polish mathematical techniques, British automation through bombs, captured materials, and skillful exploitation of operator errors made sustained Enigma decryption possible. By 1943, Bletchley Park employed over 7,000 personnel. The site had expanded far beyond the original mansion. Wooden huts and concrete blocks housed different sections working on different aspects of signals intelligence. Hut 8 handled German naval Enigma. Hut 6 worked on German Army and Air Force Enigma. Hut 4 processed and distributed decrypted naval intelligence. Hut 3 handled Army and Air Force intelligence. Additional huts housed bombs, administrative staff, and support services. The bomb operation expanded significantly. By 1943, over 200 bombs were operational at Bletchley Park and outstations. The machines ran continuously, testing millions of possible Enigma settings, based on cribs provided by cryptanalysts. When a bomb found a setting, it stopped. Operators recorded the settings and passed them to decryption rooms, where actual Enigma machines were set to those positions and used to decrypt messages. The women who operated the bombs worked 8-hour shifts, 7 days a week. The work was tedious and exhausting. The bomb rooms were loud, the machines made constant clicking and whirring sounds. The operators had to monitor their machines constantly, watching for stops that indicated a potential solution. When a machine stopped, the operator had to verify the settings, record them accurately, and report them immediately. Errors meant wasted time and possibly missed intelligence. The work was also highly classified. Bomb operators were told nothing about why they were running these machines or what the output meant. They signed Official Secrets Act declarations that bound them to permanent silence. They could not discuss their work with family or friends. Most bomb operators learned what they had actually been doing only decades after the war, when Bletchley Park was declassified. Alan Turing's contributions extended beyond the bomb design. He developed statistical techniques for determining probable plaintext from ciphertext. He created a method called banbarismus that could determine rotor order and positions without using bombs, reducing the load on the machines. Banbarismus used sequential statistical analysis and Bayesian probability calculations applied to punched paper sheets. The technique was complex but effective, allowing some messages to be broken without machine assistance. Turing also worked on other cryptographic problems beyond Enigma. He contributed to breaking German teleprinter codes encrypted by Lorenz cipher machines. He worked on speech scrambling systems for secure Allied communications. His wartime contributions to cryptography and computer science were substantial, though they remained classified until the 1970s. After the war, Turing continued work on computer design and artificial intelligence. He worked at the National Physical Laboratory on the automatic computing engine. He worked on the Manchester Mark I computer. He developed the concept of the Turing test for machine intelligence. His contributions to computer science were foundational, though he died in 1954 at age 41 under circumstances officially ruled as suicide. The secrecy surrounding Ultra and Bletchley Park continued long after the war ended. Personnel who worked there remained bound by Official Secrets Act declarations. They could not discuss their wartime work. The first public revelations came in 1974, when Group Captain F.W. Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret, with British government authorization. This was followed by additional publications and documentaries. The U-110 survivors learned in 1974 that their submarine had been boarded and Enigma captured. They had spent 33 years believing U-110 had sunk immediately after they abandoned ship. The revelation that the capture had remained secret throughout the war and for decades afterward was shocking. The survivors understood immediately that their submarine's capture had been one of the war's most significant intelligence coups. Post-war analysis attempted to quantify Ultra's impact on the war. The Battle of the Atlantic was the most clear-cut case. Historian David Kahn estimated that Ultra shortened the Battle of the Atlantic by at least 1 to 2 years. Patrick Beasley, who worked in the Admiralty's submarine tracking room during the war, concluded that without Ultra, Britain might have lost the Battle of the Atlantic entirely. The merchant shipping losses would have been unsustainable without the ability to route convoys around known U-boat positions. The strategic consequences extended beyond the Battle of the Atlantic. Ultra-intelligence influenced operations in North Africa, the Mediterranean, and the invasion of Europe. German battle plans, unit positions, supply situations, and command decisions were often known to Allied commanders before German field commanders received their orders. The intelligence advantage was substantial and sustained. But Ultra wasn't omnipotent. There were periods when Enigma couldn't be read due to procedural changes or four-rotor encryption. There were messages that couldn't be decrypted in time to be tactically useful. There were situations where intelligence couldn't be acted upon without revealing its source. Ultra was a powerful tool, but it had to be used carefully within security constraints. The development and breaking of Enigma illustrates several fundamental principles about cryptography and intelligence. First, mathematical complexity doesn't guarantee practical security. Enigma had enormous theoretical key space, but exploitable weaknesses in implementation and operation made it breakable. Second, physical security matters. No amount of mathematical sophistication can protect against capture of equipment and keys. Third, sustained intelligence advantage requires continuous adaptation. Both sides constantly tried to improve their methods, creating an ongoing competition between encryption and cryptanalysis. The Enigma story also demonstrates the importance of human factors. Operator errors provided cribs. Captured materials provided keys. Procedural mistakes created vulnerabilities. No machine could compensate for human failure to follow security procedures correctly. German authorities recognized this to some extent, implementing increasingly strict operating procedures, but they never fully eliminated operator errors. For the sailors who boarded U-110 on May 9, 1941, the significance of their actions wasn't clear at the time. They were following orders, doing their jobs, trying to capture intelligence materials before a submarine sank. Sub-Lieutenant David Balm later stated in interviews that he had no idea what an Enigma machine was when he found it. He just knew it was German communications equipment and therefore potentially valuable. The historical significance only became clear decades later when the story was declassified. Balm survived the war. He continued in the Royal Navy, eventually retiring as a captain. He rarely discussed the U-110 boarding, bound by secrecy requirements. When the story became public in 1974, he participated in interviews and documentaries describing what had happened that day in the North Atlantic. He emphasized the role of luck. If the submarine had sunk 5 minutes earlier, the boarding would have been impossible. If the scuttling charges had detonated, the boarding party would have died. If the German crew had destroyed the Enigma materials before abandoning ship, nothing would have been captured. Telegraphist Alan Long, who actually found and removed the Enigma machine, also survived the war. He returned to civilian life and worked as an electrical engineer. Like Balmy, he was bound by Official Secrets Act restrictions and couldn't discuss the boarding for decades. When he finally could tell the story, he emphasized that he was just doing his job, following procedures for searching enemy vessels. The significance of what he had found wasn't apparent until much later. Commander Joe Baker Creswell, who commanded HMS Bulldog and made the decision to board U-110, received recognition for the action but couldn't explain publicly why it was important. He continued commanding destroyers through the war. He retired from the Royal Navy as a rear admiral. His decision to board the sinking submarine rather than simply allowing it to sink was based on standard procedure for capturing intelligence materials, but the results exceeded anything he could have anticipated. The German crew of U-110 spent the war in POW camps, unaware that their submarine had been boarded or that Enigma materials had been captured. They knew their boat had been sunk by British destroyers. They assumed reasonably that it had gone down with all materials aboard. When they were repatriated after the war, they still didn't know. The secret was maintained. In the decades after the war, several myths developed about the U-110 capture. One persistent myth claimed that the boarding party included an American officer and that Americans were primarily responsible for the capture. This was false. The boarding party was entirely British. The United States wasn't even in the war in May 1941. The myth may have originated from a 2000 Hollywood film that dramatized the capture but moved it to 1942 and made it an American operation. Veterans of HMS Bulldog protested the film's historical inaccuracies, and the film's producers eventually apologized. Another myth suggested that the U-110 capture was the only source of Enigma materials, and that without this single capture, Enigma could never have been broken. This was also false. Multiple captures throughout the war provided Enigma materials. The Polish contribution in the 1930s was essential. The work at Bletchley Park would have eventually broken Enigma even without captures, though it would have taken longer. The U-110 capture was significant, but it was one piece of a much larger cryptanalysis effort. The technical details of how Enigma worked and how it was broken remained classified until the 1970s. When the information was finally released, historians and cryptographers examined the methods in detail. The consensus was that Enigma represented good cryptographic practice for its era, but it had exploitable weaknesses. The reflector design that prevented letters from encrypting to themselves was a significant vulnerability. The predictable message formats provided cribs. The mechanical implementation meant that captured machines revealed the internal wiring. Modern cryptographic systems are designed to avoid Enigma's weaknesses. They assume that adversaries have access to the algorithm and implementation details. Security depends on key secrecy rather than algorithm secrecy. They avoid patterns that could provide cribs. They use computational complexity based on mathematical problems that appear intractable even with modern computing power. But the fundamental challenge remains the same. Cryptography attempts to protect information from adversaries who are actively trying to break it. The adversaries have resources, intelligence, and motivation. They will exploit any weakness. Physical security matters. Implementation details matter. Operational procedures matter. Human factors matter. Enigma failed not because the basic concept was wrong, but because the complete system had exploitable vulnerabilities. The legacy of Bletchley Park extended far beyond World War II. The techniques developed for breaking Enigma influenced post-war cryptanalysis and computer science. The bomb machines were early examples of specialized computing equipment for solving specific mathematical problems. The organizational structure at Bletchley Park, with specialized teams working on different aspects of a common problem, influenced how large-scale technical projects were organized. Several Bletchley Park veterans went on to significant careers in computer science and intelligence. Many of the women who operated bombs or worked as cryptanalysts during the war were unable to continue in technical careers after the war due to social expectations and employment discrimination. Their contributions were unrecognized for decades. When Bletchley Park was finally declassified, historians made efforts to document their work and recognize their contributions. In 2009, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown issued a public apology for the government's treatment of Alan Turing after the war. Turing had been prosecuted in 1952 for homosexuality, which was illegal in Britain at the time. He was convicted and underwent chemical castration as an alternative to imprisonment. He died in 1954, apparently by suicide, though some historians have questioned that conclusion. The apology acknowledged that Turing's contributions to the war effort and to computer science deserved recognition and that his treatment was unjust. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Turing a posthumous royal pardon. In 2017, the Alan Turing Law pardoned all men who had been convicted under historical legislation that criminalized homosexuality. The recognition came decades too late, but it acknowledged that Turing's contributions were fundamental to Britain's survival in World War II and to the development of modern computing. The Enigma machine itself has become a symbol of the relationship between cryptography and warfare. Original Enigma machines are displayed in museums around the world. Bletchley Park is preserved as a museum and tourist attraction, with exhibits explaining how the cryptanalysis work was conducted. The site receives hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. Educational programs teach students about cryptography, mathematics, and the historical significance of signals intelligence. For the historians trying to understand World War II, the delayed revelation of Ultra's existence meant that many accounts written before the 1970s were incomplete or incorrect. Strategic decisions that seemed inexplicable suddenly made sense when Ultra intelligence was factored in. British and American commanders had often appeared to have remarkable intuition or luck. In reality, they had ultra-intelligence, providing enemy positions and intentions. The historical record had to be revised once the truth emerged. The U-110 capture on May 9, 1941, was one of several critical moments in the Battle of the Atlantic. It provided materials that allowed Bletchley Park to resume reading German naval Enigma at a crucial point in the war. The intelligence derived from that capture and subsequent captures helped turn the Battle of the Atlantic in favor of the Allies. Without that intelligence, Britain might have lost the battle. Without winning that battle, the invasion of Europe might have been impossible. The war might have lasted years longer. Sub-Lieutenant David Balm, who led the boarding party, never claimed to be a hero. In interviews decades after the war, he emphasized that he was following orders and doing his job. The historical significance only became clear later when analysts examined how ultra-intelligence had influenced the war's outcome. Balm died in 2016 at age 95. His obituaries finally could explain fully what he had accomplished on May 9, 1941, and why it mattered. The Enigma machine captured from U-110 is now displayed at Bletchley Park Museum. Visitors can see the actual machine that was recovered from the sinking submarine in 1941. The device looks simple: a keyboard, a lamp board, 3 rotors, a plug board. It doesn't look like something that could have determined the outcome of World War II. But understanding what it represented, how it worked, and what it took to break it reveals a story of mathematical brilliance, operational security, intelligence analysis, and the critical importance of information advantage in modern warfare. At 11:33 hours on May 9, 1941, when U-110 surfaced under fire from British destroyers, none of the participants knew they were part of one of history's most significant intelligence operations. The German crew was trying to save their lives. The British sailors were following procedure for capturing enemy vessels. Sub-Lieutenant Balm was doing his duty. Telegraphist Long was searching for documents. Commander Baker Cresswell was making tactical decisions based on the situation in front of him. The significance emerged later when cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park examined what had been captured, when ultra-intelligence began flowing to operational commanders, when convoy routing improved and U-boat kill rates increased, when the Battle of the Atlantic turned, when historians analyzed the data and understood what difference it had made. The story of U-110 and Enigma demonstrates that sometimes the most important moments in history are not recognized as such by the people living through them. Sometimes ordinary people doing their jobs under extraordinary circumstances achieve results that change the world.